Welcome into the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to grandfathers, adult grandchildren, and experts in areas of importance to grandfathers. Whether you're a new grandfather, a seasoned pro, or somebody interested in learning about relationships, this is the place for you. So come on in, join us as we learn together, laugh together, and support each other on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. On this episode of the Cool Grandpa Podcast, I'm going to talk to Cindy Liljedahl. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because she makes up one half of AdventuRetired. The other half, of course, is her husband, Curt. And Curt I had on last week to talk about his experiences and his memories of his grandfathers. And this week, we are going to hear Cindy and hear about her experiences and hear about her memories of not just the grandfathers, but a great-grandfather and, of course, grandmothers as well. Because, hey, grandmas are just as important as grandpas. So what we want to do on this conversation is jump in and really have some fun. Figure out kind of where the modeling of being a fun grandma, where the modeling of what these relationships look like really comes from. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Before we get into listening to Cindy's awesome stories, I want to just remind you that a great way that you can help support me is to go to my website, click on the link to buy me a coffee. That's a great way just to throw a few bucks my way, help me offset some of the costs of the production and some of the monthly costs of supporting this podcast. So I'll also include a link to that into the show notes as well to make it super easy if you're happening to watch this or listen to it even on YouTube or some of the other platforms. You can find that link super easy. But again, if you go to my website, cool-grandpa.us, over on the right-hand side, I've made it super easy for you to find that link to buy me a coffee. And you can use that, and your support would be absolutely appreciated and very much welcome. So, hey, without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Cindy. Hi, Cindy. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm excited to have you on to talk about your experiences with your grandfathers.
That's great. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, I'd love for you to introduce your grandfathers to us. Give us their names, what information you remember about them, and kind of where they grew up, all, whatever you know.
Okay. Of course, I have two grandpas that I grew up with, and I actually even knew one of my great-grandparents.
Oh, okay.
So my great-grandpa on my grandma Twait, which is my maiden name, I probably knew him I was probably 6 or 7 when he passed away, but I did go to Christmases and things like that. And I got to know him just, very, very few memories, but I did know him a little bit. But my two grandpas, my dad's side was Bernard Twait, but he was Grandpa Bun. So he was always known as Grandpa Bun. And then my mom's dad was Bill DeMoss, and my dad's name was Bill. So we had two Bills in the family. My mom married a Bill too. And so my grandpa DeMoss, and he just lived a few miles away too.
Oh, great. Great. What were some of the earliest memories you have of these two as you were growing up?
Well, both of them were hardworking farmers. I mean, both my grandparents, my grandma and grandpas, all of them, they were farmers. The women never worked outside of the home. They were the homemakers, and I don't think either one of my grandmas ever really worked in the field like my mom did with my dad. But my grandmas were just your ultimate grandmas, and my grandpas were farmers. And my one grandpa, my mom's side, was not a real big farmer, but he could provide for his family and had a smaller farm. My grandpa on my dad's side was a bigger farmer. And when I really remember him, Grandpa Bun, he was kind of sick. So as I was growing up, he kind of gotten sick. He had some problems with his neck and things like that. So I remember him a lot just sitting in a chair and being there, but it was more grandma when we went to Grandma and Grandpa Twait's house. Now, Grandma and Grandpa DeMoss was a whole different thing. My Grandpa DeMoss was, oh man, he was a lot of fun. And he's the one that when I was little, somehow I got to rubbing his neck one time or rubbing his back one time. And after that, it was like, and every time I came over there, it was, I need a back rub, Cindy. And I loved it. I loved being able to be the one that would give him a back rub. And they were both wonderful grandparents, but I actually really knew my Grandpa DeMoss a lot.
Oh, interesting. And yeah, I love that you got called in for the physical therapy.
Yeah.
At an early age.
Yeah.
Now, what was it like having the grandparents living so close to you? Because I grew up with my grandfather was across the country.
Right. Yeah, it was nice. This little town in Ringstead, Iowa, Northwest Iowa, when I was growing up, we had a lot of different weather than we have now. We had snowstorms. We had big snows. And I mean, I can actually remember when my grandparents moved into town, Grandma and Grandpa Twait, and school got called like at 10 in the morning, and they were sending the buses out. But if you drove into town, they weren't going to let you drive out or whatever. And I remember like having to walk to their house and not be able to go home and stay overnight being snowed in. That was kind of fun, And my grandpa DeMoss, who lived just 15 miles away, and I don't know if it's because you tend to, as a woman, you're closer to your parents than you are to your in-laws, and families are that way. But we spent a lot of weekends where at least one day of the weekend we were at Grandma and Grandpa, go down there and visit, or go down there for dinner, or go down there for lunch, or, stop on the way home from town. And so I saw them weekly, and it was always such a thrill.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I got to imagine that it was kind of cool to have them around for a lot of the different family activities, and especially even just the ad hoc stuff that you would have on the weekends.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. My Grandma and Grandpa DeMoss, their farm had a great big, huge weeping willow tree in the front. And every time I see a weeping willow tree, it just brings me right back to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. And just love that tree. And I've always wanted to plant one of those trees, and my husband won't let me because they're such a dirty tree. But I'm like, I've always wanted a weeping willow. But it's just, it was things like that. You see that. They also had a big pear tree. And as a kid, we would climb that tree and get pears. And we have a pear tree now. And that it does remind me of Grandma and Grandpa DeMoss.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Did you ever get recruited into doing any of the farm work?
No, not the farm work. I don't think. Maybe Grandma DeMoss might have talked us into going out and doing some gardening. If we were staying there, got pulls 10 weeds or something. But no, we did that at home in terms of chores at home. So when we went to Grandma and Grandpa's house, it was just all fun.
Okay.
Fun and games.
All right.
Running around outside, playing upstairs in the, my Grandma DeMoss's house was very small and had a really weird upstairs. You had to go through one bedroom to get to another bedroom. And so the first bedroom was kind of like a hallway, but it was a bedroom. It had a bed in it. And, you would go up there and you would just snoop. You look around, what's inside of these drawers and what's inside your closet, and it was just fun. She had a old-fashioned typewriter, like one of the very first typewriters you ever had, and we'd go up there and play on that, and just it was some cool stuff.
Oh, wow. Now, I got to ask you, do you know if they built that house themselves or had it been built by somebody else?
My Grandma and Grandpa Twait built their house, and they lived in it for many, many years, and that was a really cool house too. And it was, my brother still farms that farm, and nobody lives in that house. It's almost ready to be torn down, but there's a few things in there that I'd like to get out of there when he does do that. When we built our house, that farm was a couple of buildings were coming down, and we actually took the fireplace, the wood around the TV, that's from that farm. And in our bedroom, there's wood from the farm that we took off of one of the buildings there. And Curt and I were pulling the wood off, and he, all winter long before we moved in here, he was cleaning the wood so that we could put it from Grandma and Grandpa Twait's farm. And that means a lot to me.
Oh, that's cool that you were able to do that.
Yeah, that's really cool, I think.
Now, how did the relationship start to change and evolve a little bit as you started getting older?
With Grandma and Grandpa Twait, like I said, my Grandpa Twait was kind of an invalid when I really knew him. Although he didn't pass away till after Curt and I were married. So like the first year we were married is when he passed away. So I always knew him. He was always, I always got up to hug him and say hi, but I really didn't get to know him as an adult. My grandma, though, went blind and lived at home and had caregivers and stuff like that. And so when I would come home from college, I would go in and visit with my Grandma Twait and have really great visits. Just go in there, read her mail to her, go in there, clean out something. And one time when I was in college, I remember going in and reading her mail to her, and she's like, all right, go pick something out of the china closet. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, Grandma. No, go pick something. Well, I knew exactly what I was going to pick because I had my eye on it for like 30 years. 19 years. I love that. She always made Kool-Aid in a pitcher from, what is that called? The real colorful pottery. Fiesta. Yeah, because I have Fiesta dishes. But she had an original Fiesta pink lemonade pitcher. And I'm like, well, can I have this? And she's like, yes, that's yours, And I it's still very, it's very dear to me. And just being able to go in there and spend time with her, reading letters. And when Mackenzie, our first baby, was born, taking her into Grandma and letting her sit on Grandma's lap. And even though Grandma couldn't see her, she was so excited to have another great grandchild.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you too, so you brought up Kool-Aid, and then that jogged a memory with me about when I was visiting my grandparents. Grandma always had Kool-Aid going, or some kind of lemonade or something like that. So what was your favorite kind of Kool-Aid or drink that you remember?
Well, it definitely was lemonade. Grandma would always have lemonade, but she always had red Kool-Aid too. And wouldn't you know, I'm allergic to red dye. So I don't know, that red Kool-Aid never bothered me as a child. So I don't know, but as an adult now, I can't have anything with red dye in it. But that Kool-Aid, I don't know why it was Kool-Aid, but I guess maybe because it was cheap, it's something you always had on hand.
Oh, yeah.
You just needed water.
Yeah, well, I think, we're close to the same age, and I remember it being, I think it was 10 packs for $1.
Yeah, exactly.
So Grandma could like load up and just keep making a fresh pitcher.
And it was different. Mom and Dad never had that. We never got to have that at home. So yeah.
Yeah, Mom wasn't going to take the time to do all that stuff for me, but Grandma would be right there at the sink. Get another jug ready to go.
Yeah. My grandma and Grandpa DeMoss, now they were, as adults, even as an adult, they were so involved in my life. And Curt got to know my grandma and grandpa. We would, even when we were first married a couple of years and we come back from Texas, we always had Christmas Eve at their house. And so we would, here we are bringing a baby and have 5 Christmases. It was really hard on us, but we had to go to Grandma and Grandpa's, and both Grandma and Grandpa's houses, Christmas Day one, Christmas Eve the other. And Grandma and Grandpa DeMoss, the Christmas there was just a blast. The men all went down to the basement to drink Falstaff beer and play cards. And, as girls would all be upstairs in the kitchen talking, and and for weeks leading up to it, my mom and her mother and my sister, we'd be making homemade cookies and candies, for Christmas. And it was a lot of fun.
Now that you've got a granddaughter and you're not the young couple doing the traveling, how do you view that now as like the grandparent, when you know that like your daughter and your granddaughter would make the efforts to come to you? Because now I'm older, it's like, oh, I can appreciate the fact that the kids are making those drives.
Yeah. Kurt just whispered something, but I was going to say the one thing that I wanted to be like is more like, my kids' grandparents, which would be my mom and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, every year that we had kids. And this is back, we're talking 1980. Mackenzie's born 80, 92. I was 80. We were married 86, but in 92, we were still, in that messy middle where you're saving money and it's hard to, to fly up every year. And we were always the ones that had to fly up. But my mother-in-law and my father-in-law always paid for one plane ticket. And, that was such a blessing for us. We only had to pay for a while. It was just the two of us, and they'd pay for one. And then it was the three of us and they'd pay for one. And then when it was the four of us, they would pay for one. And it just made it a lot. And now that we're the grandparents, I want to be like that. I want to, now that I have the means that I can do that, I want to be that type of person.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good reason too, to also make sure that you're a good saver and you start those habits, even if you're the spender of the couple. It's right. Like, okay, we need to have help the kids out with the travel expenses.
It is because, we would come up here and, you get your reservations in. I mean, we came up here a couple times with kids with the flu, but you could not come up because you already spent $400 on the plane ticket. And if, it's like, oh my gosh, I just hope they don't barf in the plane, and get home.
Right. Yeah. You put the little ice pack under their shirt, keep the sweats down. And,
It's like, okay, can we sit at the back of the plane? Right. Nobody ever wants to sit in the back. I would like to sit in the back of the plane, please.
Yeah. Away from everybody. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Were there any particular activities that you used to do with your grandparents that was, really special, or was definitely like, hey, this is grandpa or grandma and granddaughter time?
Yeah, there's two, one with each memory. My grandma Twait, and it's more my grandma. Like I said, my grandpa was always there, supervising, I would guess. But my grandma Twait taught me how, and my mom, and how to make a Swedish kringla, or Norwegian kringla. I think it's more Norwegian than the Danish, but it's a soft cookie that's a very holiday thing. And to this day, I make it all the time. And I would make that a lot, or I would watch grandma make it a lot. It's when you have to roll out, it's dough and all that. So grandma, the Twaits, it was always the kringla. I would, that was the big thing. And that was always she always had kringla and chocolate cookies, homemade chocolate cookies. And I have cousins. Once in a while, I'll post, just made grandma's cookies, and I'll have cousins that live in Texas or South Dakota, and like, oh, what's that recipe? I want that recipe. I remember those cookies because that was chocolate icing on the cookie, and it was, delicious. And then my grandma DeMoss and my grandpa DeMoss, one of the things that I really was really cool is when we were growing up, they took every one of us kids, I think, except the very last of my cousins. The youngest cousin didn't get to do that because they were already quite old. They couldn't do it, but they took us on a vacation.
Wow.
And that was pretty cool. I got to go with my cousin Julie, and was it Lori? I know it was one of my two cousins. And we went to the Ozarks, and we all stayed in one room, grandpa snored, grandma snored, and us, but we sit there laughing at them till we fell asleep, and oh my gosh, we had so much fun. It was like probably 4 days, 3 nights and 4 days, but they took all of us on vacation with them, and that was really a cool thing. And I want, Curt and I want to do that with Sonny someday.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I think on our previous conversation, when we were talking about adventures, one of the items that came up was, I think Curt took you up to the family's resort, and, you met everybody there.
I did. In fact, the very first time that Curt took me up there was the year before we got married. He had to test me out in the Boundary Waters to see if I was good enough to get married to. If I could camp out in the Boundary Waters, I could be in the family. And on the way home, we stopped at the family resort, And there was probably 40 or 50. It was one of the anniversaries. I think it was maybe the 50th anniversary. I don't know, but it was they and I remember because I was the photographer. They all had a great big picture done, and I was the only one that wasn't in the family. Yeah, I was. We weren't. If I would have been, we weren't even. I don't think we were even engaged. We had engaged that summer or that winter, but I got to take the picture of the 40 of them there, but his uncles, they were really truly the grandparents to my girls. There's 5 of them that my girls actually knew better than they knew their own grandpas, because both of their grandpas passed away so young. And so those great uncles on his side, they're the grandpas that my girls grew up with.
Oh, what a great blessing that is to have that.
Yeah, I mean, not only did we know them up in Minnesota, but they actually all visited us in South Texas.
That's awesome.
I think every single one of them came at least once down to see us, and a couple more than one time. So that's your uncles, so that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, what are some of the lasting memories or legacies that you have of your grandfathers and your grandmothers?
I guess for my grandma and grandpa Twait, it's, well, for both of them, the work ethic. I do believe that, the work ethic that I had, and maybe it's just a farm ethic too, but, kids, you work hard, and when you work hard and you get done, then you're done, and then you can enjoy whatever time you have left. And, I remember, both my grandparents they worked hard. And I feel like that's a part of the legacy they left me. And I tried, Curt and I, we worked hard. We might have retired early, at 54, but the last 6 years that I worked as the reading specialist, I worked 4 nights a week on, I had a tutoring business at my house, where I was tutoring anywhere between 2 and 3 hours a night afterwards, and just that money, was very welcomed, and it helped pay for a lot of the things that allowed us to be able to save and invest more, and with salary money type of thing, and Curt, same thing with him being a coach and working a lot of extra hours that way. And so I feel like the work ethic that we have came from our parents and our grandparents, and that's a big legacy. And I think we showed our kids that too.
It's interesting because I feel like when I talk to folks that had grandparents or parents that were farmers and that did that work ethic is one of those things that really comes up, because you can't skip out on it. When you're a farmer, you've got to get out there, you got to plow, you got to get the crops in, you got to take care of the livestock if you have it.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one of the legacies they left me. They also, I think they were also, and I know Curt said this with his, but they were both men of faith. I mean, just big men of faith. You went to church. There was no choice. You went to Sunday school, you went to church, and, we raised our kids that way. And I'm so glad we did. Cause they love going to church. They love being who they are because of their religion and, their background. And, they're good kids. And I know that I don't worry about them. I feel so blessed that way, that we're so lucky, that we have such a great family. And so I think having faith, my grandparents, gave us that. And I remember when my grandpa died first of both of my families, and my grandmas were so strong, they were so strong. And I remember when my grandma, I don't really remember when my grandma Twait moved into town, because they moved into town quite a long time, when I was in high school or junior high. But when my grandma DeMoss had to leave the farm after my grandpa passed away, we were already, Mackenzie was probably 4 or 5. And I remember how hard that was on her. It was just horrible, for her to leave that farm. They had built that farm. That farm it was hard. And I remember going to visit her in an apartment, and she was only there a few months before she got sick and passed away. And yeah, I think both of them kind of had broken hearts. My grandma Twait, that woman, she was strong. Even she was little tiny woman, quite round, but tiny, and she lived out in her house in Ringstead 6, 7, 8 years blind, and got around with, and so at one time even had grandkids living at home with her, and so it was just, they were tough women.
They sound like the type of folks I'd love to sit down at the coffee shop with and have a piece of pie with,
I loved talking to both of them. My grandma and grandpa Twait, like I said, my grandma Twait, you could sit and talk to her forever. She was just the sweetest person in the world. My grandpa was very quiet, very stoic. My grandma and grandpa DeMoss were totally opposite. Oh my God. They were just loud, and they're German, and they were, and my grandma would say the wrong word and she didn't even care, it just was so fun. And I remember as a kid, there was two things. One thing that I would never do. And I remember staying with them. My parents must've been on a trip, and I had a really bad sore throat. And you know how back in those days, they would use Vicks and put all over your chest, all that. She made me swallow Vicks.
Oh,
like, oh my God, Grandma, I know I can't do this. No, it'll coat your throat just like, and I'm surprised I'm alive today because of this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure on the bottle it says external use only.
Do not ingest.
Right.
I know. Oh no, take a big finger of that and then it'll coat your throat.
Oh my gosh.
You can't breathe afterwards.
Right.
Oh, and then they would play cards. Was it 500, Curt? Yeah, 500. I don't know. I don't even remember how to play it, but every time we went there, it was 500. You play 500. And when you're finally old enough, the kids got to go and play. It was so much fun, playing 500. It was just a lot of fun.
So is that an age thing with the kids being able to play?
You had to be old enough to sit at the table there and be able to do it. And then what was funny too is when we got, like when I was in college and when I was drinking age, or when we were married, my grandpa always bought cheap beer. That's just it. And it was at that time it was Falstaff that was here, because it's from Minnesota, and it had the little rebus puzzle on the bottom of the lid. And so all the grandson-in-laws, and they would all be, instead of, trying to pass the time because they're so bored at Grandma and Grandpa's house, but they're drinking beer and trying to figure out the puzzles. Falstaff. Yeah, it was just fun. We had a lot of good laughs.
Oh, wow. Have you already started thinking about some of the experiences that you had with your grandparents, and then the experiences that you want to have with your granddaughter and maybe other grandkids?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I want to be I don't want to be just the grandma that just bakes and stays in the kitchen. I want to be the one that plays. I've already got plans. When we built our house, we have it's a 2-story, and we have, like, right now we're in a little alcove of the stairway going upstairs. And on the other side is a little room, but I'm going to turn that into a Harry Potter closet as soon as my granddaughter is old enough to read Harry Potter. And so that's going to be a Christmas present someday, where she comes back and it's going to look just like Harry Potter's little closet, and, things like that. I want to play, and I'm really, books are huge. As a reading specialist, I know how important that is. I want to help her learn to read, maybe early even, but I know I can, I just, that's important, that type of a thing.
Oh, that's awesome. And I can tell you, I've got friends of ours that have like a little area in their house, and it has the batwing doors on it. The granddaughter absolutely loves it because she's got like a kitchen set up in there and some dollhouse, and she knows that, like, she goes through those batwing doors and she's in her space.
Yeah, definitely. This will be perfect because it's big enough that an adult can fit in there with a kid, and so I'll be able to get in there, and it's already got the floor down and it's already been painted. So I'm just gonna have to paint a bookshelf and the owl and all those things, but I'm going to have that ready for her. That's going to be fun.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, Cindy, I've had you on for a little while. Is there anything about your grandparents that I haven't asked you about that you would like to share with us?
Boy, I don't know. It's just kind of fun thinking about them. I know, like my great grandparents, I actually have a couple of things that remind them. My great grandpa, when I was a little girl, actually made all of us grandkids Barbie furniture. And I still have that, so someday my granddaughter will have Barbie furniture, that homemade sofas that my great, and it'd be her great grandfather, I think, right? Her great grandfather made. And there's a few things that just, I'm not trying to be materialistic in my life as I get older, but there's a few things that I really like to pass on, that, okay, so this is something that I played with, something your mother played with, I want to do that kind of thing because my grandparents did that for me. They gave me this, or they did this and I kept it, and it's important. So I guess I'm going to try to embrace that, but not be so materialistic, but be more hands-on.
And I don't know if it's so much the materialistic as it is the stories and the memories associated with the object, right?
Yes.
Because it's one thing to go down to the store and you get something that's made in a factory in China or Honduras, whatever, right, and it's just stuff. But it's another thing when it's, hey, great grandpa made this out in the wood shop.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
In the stores.
With if you ask my daughters about their grandpas, they don't remember much. Well, they, because they're quite young. But the one thing my dad did for our girls was when my oldest daughter was 2, he made her a house out of a refrigerator box. And when we came home for Christmas, we flew home, that she was, talking and walking at 2. Oh my gosh, she lived in that house that entire week. And my dad would be laying half in it and half out of it, having coffee with her. And because my dad was the one that was on the floor and he was always playing with them. And every time we came home, then that summer they'd get that house out, he'd fold it away and put it away. And I think that's probably still at my mom's someplace. I'm sure she didn't get rid of it. And it's just, they covered it with contact paper and it just was so sweet. And that's the kind of grandparent I want to be. Oh,
that's awesome. That's awesome. I love hearing that story because it reminds me of making forts out of those refrigerator boxes and the oven boxes and the, going Sheets. Up. Yeah. Going up there and doing all that stuff. That's fantastic.
It is.
So, well, Cindy, I really appreciate you talking to us about your grandparents and really sharing these insights and these memories with us. This has been a great example of awesome grandparents.
Well, and I think your podcast is so cool because I don't know how we're going to have to figure out how we can save this. And so that my granddaughters can listen to this when they're, 50 years old and say, oh, listen to my grandma talk about, because it is fun having those memories, like your book, my grandfather's grandfather.
My grandpa's grandpa.
Yeah. When you hear things and you see some things, those stories are just so precious.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I love capturing them and having these conversations is a big reason why I do this.
Yeah.
And then
definitely.
I'll have to, Dropbox you guys the raw files and things for this.
I would love that because I would really like to keep it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Well, I do appreciate you being on and just wanted to say, wish you a good evening.
All right. Thank you.
Boy, I enjoyed listening to Cindy talk about her memories of her grandparents and especially some of these memories that she has around growing up and being in school and those big snow days that come through. Boy, I can remember some of those big, heavy snows when I was a kid growing up in Louisville, Kentucky and in Springfield, Virginia. Now, we never had snows quite like what Cindy was describing there in Iowa, but at the same time, we had plenty of snow days and we had plenty of times where suddenly we had 2 or 3 feet of snow and things were just absolutely at a standstill. So you only could get to and fro as far as you could walk sometimes. So I thought it was interesting that Cindy would sometimes take refuge in her grandparents' house. And I'm sure they didn't mind having her over. And I'm sure she, of course, had a blast taking some refuge at her grandparents' house. These were really fun memories. And I just really want to emphasize to you that if you're looking to build a memorable relationship with your grandchildren, you know, it's not always the big over-the-top gestures. It's not always the Disneylands, and it's not always these types of things, but it's the small gestures. It's the sitting down and talking with each other. It's spending some time, and because you never know when a quantity amount of time becomes a quality amount of time for a grandchild. So I hope you take that to heart. And until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.